Shalom and welcome once again to Pearls of the Torah. I'm Moreh Matan, Pastor Matt McEwen, and it's good to be with you again this week. This week we are in Parashat Bamidbar. We're in a brand new book of the Torah. Bamidbar means in the wilderness, and at least in my language it is called Numbers. It covers the book of Numbers from chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 4, verse 20. And this section deals with the organization of the Israelite community in the desert, their preparation for travel, and their arrangement around the tabernacle, the encampments that they made around the tabernacle. We have today a detailed commentary on this portion, in which, as always, we will integrate traditional Jewish commentary and ideas, along with a Messianic Jewish insight for each of our points. As always, we recite the traditional blessing for studying the Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to be engrossed, to be in the business of the Torah. Point number 1, the census of the Israelites. We start this Torah portion with a counting, with a sentence. And we are told by our sages that this is proof that God cares about the Israelites. There were a number of times that the children of Israel were counted, for instance, before the sin of the golden calf, as well as after. But several times they were counted by God, through the agency of Moses, of course, to see how many people there were, and how many, in this case, from each tribe. So we have a detailed census of all of the men of Israel, men of military age. Rashi comments that this census shows God's love for the Israelites by counting them frequently, as I just mentioned, after significant events. The counting emphasizes the importance and the individuality of each person in the community. As far as a messianic insight goes, Yeshua's parables often underscore the value of each individual, such as the parable of the lost sheep. You all know this story very well. There was a shepherd who had 100 sheep, but one went missing. He left the 99 sheep and sought out the one sheep that had gone astray. This is an object lesson to us of how much our God cares for us. Each of us has a value. Remember, Yeshua said himself that God knows when even one sparrow falls to the ground. And then he also tells us that we are more valuable than many sparrows. So this shows us in Luke chapter 15, 3 through 7, that each person is precious to God, mirroring the individual attention that God gave the children of Israel during the census. I've mentioned before a couple of times in this Torah cycle about the danger of counting people if you are treating people like you would treat a herd of animals. Remember, there is this specific instance in the Torah where it is established that everyone gives a half shekel. We spoke about this a couple of months ago. Everyone gives a half shekel, and the shekels are counted, and then we know how many people there are. Many times people ask, and we've addressed it before this year, many people ask, why was God angry with King David when he counted his men? Well, the reason our sages tell us is that people are not possessions like a herd of animals. We don't count people like they are supplies, like they are things. And this is why, when you give the half shekel, The people aren't counted specifically, but rather the coins are counted. Each person has such a value that we don't treat them like objects. This is something that we need to be reminded of. Let's look at number 2, the arrangement of the tribes. The tribes are arranged in a specific order around the tabernacle. We're told this in chapter 2 of our Torah portion. Each tribe's position is not arbitrary, though. It represents their role and significance within the community, as discussed in various midrashim. As far as a messianic insight goes, the organized arrangement around the tabernacle prefigures the order in the body of Messiah, where each member has a specific role and function based on the gifts that we each are given. We see this in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 18. Yeshua is the cornerstone that holds it all together, reflecting the central position of the tabernacle. Now, if you'll remember, in the Torah, different people have different roles. There are different classifications of Israelite. We have the Kohanim, or the priests, the Leviim, or the Levites, and then we have the Israelites, the rest of Israel. Now, just because there are certain Kohanim and Leviim, this doesn't mean that one is more important or less important than the other. It's important for us to remember that a different role doesn't necessarily mean more authority, more power, or more importance. I often like to discuss it in the context of a team, a sports team. If you are on a football team, there are different positions that people play on the team. But it doesn't mean that one player is more important than another player. We all have a specific role on the team, and all of us go to victory together. In a team sport, we're not going for individual glory, but rather the betterment of the entire team. The entire team succeeds or fails. We succeed or fail as a group, as one unit. And this is exactly how it was with the positioning of the children of Israel. We also have to remember that as they are going into the promised land, most of the tribes get their own ancestral land, their own piece of land. Now, in the case of one of them, we're on one side of the river and the other. But just because there are different spots of land doesn't mean that one spot is more important than another. Each is given what they are supposed to be given. Just like with our spiritual gifts, all of us have gifts that need to be used for the kingdom, not for our own glory. Number 3. The role of the Levites. The Levites are given a special role separate from the census of the rest of Israel. They are tasked with caring for the tabernacle. We see this in Numbers chapter 3. Their duties are symbolic of spiritual service and devotion as detailed in the Talmud in Bava Batra 121b. In a messianic way, this mirrors the role of believers under the new covenant, and we are described in 1 Peter, those of us that are Jews and those who are grafted in. We're told in 1 Peter 2:9 that we are a royal priesthood, dedicated to serving God and upholding His sanctuary. And the sanctuary, at least for now, is a spiritual one, since the temple does not stand today. So for today, in a midrashic way, we are like the temple. We are living stones in the tabernacle of God. We pray every single day, multiple times a day, that the temple would be rebuilt and that God's presence will return to Zion. May it be soon and in our days. Number 4, the redemption of the firstborn. In Numbers chapter 3, verses 45 through 51, we have this very special ceremony that is called Pidyon Haben, or the redemption of the firstborn. You see, it was originally the plan for the firstborn male of every family to be in the priestly class. However, after the sin of the golden calf, the tribe of Levi, who did not participate in the worship of the golden calf, they were then given the priesthood. So every firstborn belongs to God. And so when there is a firstborn male, that firstborn child belongs to the Lord and so must be redeemed. There is a special ceremony where 5 silver coins, still to this day, are given to a Kohen, and the rabbi says a piece of liturgy, and the Kohen says something, and the child's father says something, and that money, those silver coins, are given to redeem that child. The coins are given to the Kohen. This is a very wonderful and beautiful ceremony, and it's an act that has deep roots into Jewish tradition. We learn in the yeshiva that this is exactly what was happening to the baby Yeshua as he was brought to the temple. There is a man there named Simeon, or Shimon, who obviously is a priest because he holds the child and speaks a blessing over the child. No doubt the ceremony is similar, if not exact, to what it is today. And the priest would ask, would you like to leave this child at the temple to be in the service of the Lord, or would you like to pay the price for redemption so that you can keep the child? Obviously, Mary and Joseph paid that price, made the offering, and they took Yeshua home with them. This ceremony reflects God's claim on the firstborn that is mentioned in the book of Exodus. From a messianic perspective, Yeshua is often referred to as the firstborn over all creation. We see this in Colossians chapter 1. His role as the Redeemer reflects the ultimate fulfillment of this concept, redeeming not just the firstborn, but all of humanity. Number 5, the census of the Levites. In a traditional Jewish perspective, we see that unlike other tribes, the Levites are counted from the age of 1 month rather than 20 years. We see this in Numbers 3:15, and this highlights their unique sanctity and dedication to religious service. This special treatment is analyzed in the Mishnah and in the Talmud, emphasizing their role in spiritual leadership. From a Messianic Jewish perspective, this foreshadows the inclusivity of Yeshua's ministry, which calls not based on age or background, but the heart's readiness to serve God. His disciples come from diverse backgrounds, reflecting this broader call. I have often questioned the logic in the choosing of the 12. We do see diverse backgrounds. Some are fishermen. One is a tax collector. One is a zealot. We have others that have various backgrounds. There's an old tradition that Judas Iscariot was very learned. He had a lot of education. It doesn't seem to matter what the person's background is. Yeshua even calls, in a couple of different cases, disciples from the same family. This is very interesting to us. It doesn't seem to matter if the person is wealthy or not, what town they come from, or how old they are. We even see that Yeshua chooses people of different looks. After all, in ancient English translations of the Brit Chadashah, or the New Testament, there's one called James the Less. In other words, a James, or Jacob rather, who was shorter. So it doesn't even matter if you're short or tall, educated or not, white collar or blue collar, Yeshua chooses based on the heart. Number 6, the duties of the Kohathites, Gershonites, and Merarites. From a traditional Jewish perspective, these specific duties assigned to the different families of the Levites regarding the tabernacle's transport, we see this in Numbers chapter 4, symbolized organized religious service and care for sacred duties, as elaborated in the Talmud in Tractate Shabbat 92a. From a Messianic Jewish perspective, Yeshua teaches that service in the kingdom of God requires careful handling of what is holy and a dedication to one's appointed tasks. We see this in Luke chapter 16, verse 10. The division of labor among the Levites illustrates the principle that everyone has a specific role in God's plan, which must be executed with faithfulness and reverence. We also must be grateful for the calling that we have. Remember, this was the source of the great rebellion of Korah. He did not think that he had an important enough role. His argument was, aren't we all holy that have been called from our tribe? His family had a specific duty as for carrying articles of the tabernacle, such as the Ark of the Covenant. But he didn't think this role was important enough. He longed for a higher station, something that put him more in the spotlight. This was the problem with Korah's attitude. So we need to not only do our job that we're given, our mission, with the right faithfulness and reverence, but we must do it with gratitude, not being envious of someone else's job or ministry. In conclusion, the Torah portion of Bamidbar sets the stage for the Israelites' journey through the wilderness, emphasizing organization, sanctity, and the specific roles within the community. From a Messianic Jewish perspective, these themes are seen as prophetic, that they are shadows of realities that are fulfilled in Yeshua and in his teachings. It points us to a well-ordered community centered around the presence of God, with each member fulfilling their God-given role within the sacred structure of the Messianic body. Remember what I just read. Order. It must be ordered. Our God is a God of order and not a God of chaos. This interpretation bridges our traditional Jewish understandings with the revelations of the New Covenant, and it showcases to us continuity and fulfillment. I want to thank you again for joining me this week, and I pray that you will find your peace and your fitting into your calling. Don't be jealous of someone else's calling, but do your job, fulfill your mission in the way that God would want you to. And do it in order, not in chaos. Thank you once again for joining me. I pray God's richest blessings upon you and upon your family. Shalom and Kol Tuv.